Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, July 23rd, 2026, and today we take a question about raw manure and parlay that into a convo about Cyclospora. Then we discuss organizing seeds and mint. Not together, not necessarily not together. We'll find out, so let's do it. All right, happy Thursday, everyone. I hope you all are doing well this fine late week in July. I'm feeling mildly more caught up than I was, 2 days ago, I guess, when I got home from Colorado. Just seeing how much everything has changed, like we showed in the intro to yesterday's episode, had me feeling a little bit overwhelmed, but it's getting back to a manageable now, which is nice. Got some carrots sown and covered partly with burlap to continue those trials. I did have one fall casualty on the farm from the trip, and it was a small patch of winter squash. You'll remember this one. I had a patch that I didn't feel great about because of the weed situation under the cover crop that I put in some winter squash there. Well, I'd been keeping up with it up until a week ago, but the 6 days away was just a little too much, and I had to make the decision to cull it or let it grow, and then effectively just allow for some weed seeds that I would have to deal with next year. And because it was not an important crop for me necessarily, I went ahead and culled it. I mowed it down. I'll cover that with tarp and then start with another cover crop this fall in a more weed-free situation. I don't have to do that often, just like cull a whole crop, but it does happen. The lesson being, if the area where you cover cropped is not weed-free before the cover crop goes in, it will not be weed-free after the cover crop has been terminated. To be fair, I did think I could get some hay, but that turned out to not be the case because of the drought that we had this spring. But oh well, live and learn and keep learning. What are you all up to, good, bad, or otherwise? Let us know, or better yet, upload a 20-second farm video clip to Dropbox or Drive and share that with Farmer Mike at no-tillgrowers.com. Always a highlight to see those. All right, so Thursdays are our mailbag days from the Patreon page. As always, please feel encouraged to add your 2 cents in the comments section as to how you might answer these questions, because I definitely do not have a monopoly on all the good ideas or good advice. So yeah, chime in with your thoughts. Today's first Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Shane Cooming, who writes, quote, "Hey Jesse, love the show. Thank you to you and the No-Till crew for all the hard work you put into providing all this incredible info. My question is related to the June 5th episode regarding sawdust. I use pine shavings for my bedding for my chicken coop, but honestly, they're more like sawdust than shavings. Obviously, when I clean out the coop, it's loaded with chicken droppings as well. Is that enough to counteract the carbon in the pine shavings? I've just been putting it in the compost pile, but am interested in your thoughts if it could be used as a weed suppressant / amendment in the future garden beds," end quote. All right, Shane, thanks for the great question here. And so, yeah, I would guess the amount of chicken manure that you're getting when you clean out the coop is probably enough nitrogen to balance out the carbon in the wood chips / wood shavings / sawdust. And with enough moisture and proper turning, it should all break down nicely together in the compost. Now, that said, I would almost definitely compost it with some potential exceptions. I wouldn't add it directly to the beds just for fear of any sort of, cross-contamination. And as we've talked about many times on this show at this point, you have to follow the 91-20-day rule if you plan to sell the produce. And you should also have a similar rule, even if it's just you that plans on eating it, because you probably don't want salmonella or E. coli. That's just kind of a wild guess. So real quick, that rule just means that you cannot apply manure to an area where something that touches the ground, like a radish or a head of lettuce, within 120 days of harvesting that. Or if it's something like peppers or tomatoes or whatever that don't really touch the ground, it's 90 days after that last manure application that it can be harvested. So apply it as raw manure well before those times to be safe. But to that point, the exceptions are, applying that manure mix to the beds many months in advance, or applying it in the fall and using a cover crop over the winter to not only help retain some of those nutrients, but also keep the soil healthy and in place over the winter. So that's the option as well, and it stays within that 91-20-day rule pretty smoothly. I personally love it when I can collect chicken manure and mix it with carbon like that. For sure, that's quite the compost recipe there. But food safety is always paramount to that point. Since my trip to Colorado coincided with the Cyclospora outbreak, the biggest in history notably, it deserves a little explaining because it may be affecting your lettuce sales or perhaps lettuce buying or menu choices or whatever. Cyclospora is not related to chicken manure or any other animal manures except for humans. Cyclospora is a parasite that finds its way onto food through contact with contaminated human feces. This means that either the wash water was contaminated or the irrigation water or the hands of the person who harvested it, or something along those lines. That's how it gets distributed. That does not likely mean someone is out there spraying raw human manure onto your lettuce, at least not wittingly. It could simply mean that some massive farm somewhere is having an outbreak and the water from the bathrooms is leaching into the water for irrigation lines and contaminating an entire field or something like that. Or it's making its way into the wash water somehow, or the water mixed for the pesticides. You take like a concentrate of pesticides and you mix it with water. It could be the water there. It's not clear yet beyond the fact that it was likely iceberg lettuce grown on a farm in Mexico, sent to several like Taco Bells and some other places. For the number of people to be infected who have been so far, though, it's a really big thing, like a water supply, and not likely a single person who didn't wash their hands, or even a small group of people who did not properly wash their hands. Also, because this particular parasite is, a parasite that has both eggs, oocysts as they're called, and live bodies, it isn't necessarily as easy to treat with, say, like alcohol-based sanitizers or whatever. They are sticky things and they can stay on produce quite easily, especially those that have lots of crevices. So on the worker side, make sure you are washing your hands thoroughly after using the restroom, as you should always anyway, and make sure your wash water is not contaminated by having it checked. Know the source of all of your water and know that they cannot be contaminated. So yes, even if you're spraying a nutrient foliar spray, make sure the water that you're using for that foliar spray is clean. If you have a well, get it checked out regularly. If you have symptoms like diarrhea, that would be unfortunate. Go to the clinic and get checked for Cyclospora parasites before you harvest anything. I mean, if you're having diarrhea, you should probably just rest and drink water anyway. But yes, get checked out too. You do not want to pass whatever you have on to customers, no matter if it's Cyclospora or anything else. For customers, for the most part, buying from small local farmers is going to be your best bet at avoiding getting this very uncomfortable, potentially hospitalizing parasite, because the odds of a large outbreak are lower with small scale farms that care about their food safety. As people who are feeding people, making sure you are following all the safety guidelines is important. People's health is in your hands. I mean, literally in this case. I hope that's reassuring or helpful or something. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, where have all the seed packets gone? Like, really, where did I put them? Be right back.
Watermelon's grown in clay soil. Never added any sand here. It's July 21st, 2026. And I've got about 6 of these babies. They're about 6 inches in diameter and about another 6 that are a bit smaller. So that's what's going on today.
Want to harvest seeds adapted to your farm, but you're thinking, look, I have a market farm to run. I'm way too busy weeding and picking tomatoes. I'm Dan Brisebois, and I'm here to tell you that you can grow seed on your farm without losing your mind. On the Seed Farmer podcast, and in my book, The Seed Farmer, I share exactly how busy growers make seed crops work alongside a bustling farm business. Find The Seed Farmer wherever you get your books and podcasts. Go grow some seeds.
All right, my lovely listeners and viewers, this is your regular reminder that if you just happen to be enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, Patreon support is what makes it possible. If this show brings you, $24 worth of value per year, you can show that love over at patreon.com/no-till-growers, and we thank you. Now, today's second Patreon mailbag question comes to us from Patreon member John Rozier, who writes, quote, I don't know if this topic has been discussed before, but my question is, if you have any recommendations, tips, or tricks for organizing seed. I have a small amount of seed that I saved and also a lot of packets of seed bought from various sources. I have a lot of different varieties of seed for many different vegetable types. Unfortunately, I have very disorganized mess going on, and I have even misplaced a lot of lettuce seed, but hopefully it will turn up somewhere. Maybe it will plant itself in an empty raised bed if there is one available. Thanks. End quote. Yeah, that would be nice. I wish lettuce would just plant itself sometimes. I wish everything would just plant itself sometimes. It just doesn't usually work that way, except for weeds. They seem good at it. Anyway, good stuff here, John. Thank you. And I've touched on this subject before, but never hesitate to ask a question that might have been answered before, because there's always new things to say about it or new approaches, and who doesn't need a refresher sometimes anyway? Okay, so there are actually sort of two answers to this. There is the physical act of organizing seed, and then the spreadsheet that it sounds like you need. First, on the physical side, where to keep seed and how to keep it from becoming a giant mess. We keep all of our seed in our cooler in small totes or large lidded Tupperware. If you can pick your name there. Honestly, we've used the same ones for probably like 8 to 10 years now, so they look a little rough, not gonna lie, but they've held up well. And each one has a category of seeds that it contains. Like we have a squash, carrots, lettuce, corn, bean tote. We have a flowers and herbs tote. We have a tomatoes, peppers, and cukes tote. Then we have the brassicas tote, which tends to be quite overflowing. Also, for bigger quantities like the cover crop seeds and that sort of stuff, we have a large tote that we keep that sort of stuff in. And we have a few jars to keep our lettuce seed in, etc. It doesn't have to be those exact groupings, but that's what has worked for us. And although we don't get rodents in the cooler, the lids give us a little added protection just in case the rodents sort of figure it out. Now, on the back end organizational stuff, a good Google sheet may set you free here. It doesn't have to be anything complicated, but something that has weights and amounts and maybe even, location of the seed. That would be super helpful here, it sounds like. That way, when you like seed something or add something to the seed stock, you can just click on your phone and plug it into the Google sheet. That might also help down the line with breeding. If you want to, start saving seeds, have a tab that enables you to keep track of certain plants and traits that you like and where you put each of those seeds you saved. No need to overthink it. Even just a simple physical notepad, and if that's your style, can go quite far. Some people love a good spreadsheet. I'm personally pretty happy with a simple one, but always impressed with a complex one. And some people just enjoy a handwritten note. I mean, you could keep a notebook with your seed packets if that's more your speed. You could even subdivide the totes so it's easier to find specific tomatoes or peppers or whatever you might need in that bin. But as long as you keep them in a cool, dry, dark place, that should be enough for happy seeds. Oh, and label the packets. That's important. You've got to be able to keep track of what it is. Put the date on there, what seed it is, where you harvested it, those sorts of things. I've got a bunch of seeding to do, in fact, today, and our little bit of organization will help speed that process up tremendously. Anyway, anything I missed there in seed storage, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to take one last quick break, and when we come back, mint management. Mint management. Be right back.
Hey everyone, it's Farmer Mike here. Just a quick check-in with one of those fails in the garden that you feel really, really bad about and think about a lot, and then you have like a slice of pizza and like a cold beverage at night, and then you feel okay about it because it's not that big of a deal in the long run. So completely, as you can see, neglected to stay up on picking our yellow summer squash, and this is what we're left with. Just probably 300 pounds of overripe yellow squash. So that's the deal with that. And if y'all have any recommendations on what to do with something like this, let me know. But I thought I'd reach out to a few farmers in the area to see if they could feed it to their livestock or something, and also wouldn't hurt to put them in the compost pile either. So anywho, that's the squash, and at least the cherries are looking hot and heavy, and lots of weeds and lots of vegetables. So yeah.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
All right, one last question from the Patreon mailbag. This one from Mark Hare, who writes, quote, "Hey, Jesse and crew, my main question is about caring for mints. Is there a book you would recommend, or is there an herb podcaster equivalent to Jesse Frost? We have 4 varieties of ground spreading mints: chocolate mint, spearmint, peppermint, and lemon mint, or Melissa." That's fun. They all tend to grow, and then crash out and die, and then pick up again out on the edges. Are there specific techniques for keeping them healthy, avoiding the crash? Are there tricks to harvesting them to help keep them controlled and healthy in the space that we want them to occupy? End quote. Okay, thanks, Mark. And so on the resources thing, I'm not sure about herb podcasts. However, there is, in general, no other farmer I know dumb enough to do daily podcasts, but you never know. There may be an herb daily podcast out there. Now, there probably are herb grower podcasts and series and individual individual interviews out there in general, but that's not really my area of expertise. So I wouldn't want to just throw out, like what I can find on the internet without giving a good thorough listen. But anyone who does listen or watch those sorts of podcasts can feel free to let us know in the comments. Or folks over at the No-Till Growers Forum that might have some good advice for you too if you want to go chat with them over there. I'd definitely be down to give one or two shows a listen, so I'll be on the lookout too. Herbs, in fact, can be quite profitable, and some of them, like mint, are relatively easy perennials to grow from seed or from stolons, the horizontal stems, also sometimes just called rhizomes. All right, so let's just do some quick hitters here on mint because I really could do a whole show on it, and maybe I will one day. First, mint is a shallow-rooted crop that relies heavily on consistent moisture and consistent nitrogen to stay green, lush, and happy. The nitrogen can come from compost top dressing. It can come from liquid fish hydrolysate added through the fertigation system, or on a backyard scale, like a watering can. If the mint is crashing for you before you expect it to, then perhaps it simply is a lack of fertility or a lack of water. Now, the commercial growers, like those who do mint for essential oils, toothpaste, candy, or whatever, which yes, that's a thing. I hadn't really thought about it until doing this episode. But anyway, they use seed sterile mints that aren't effectively going to take over the world like several acres of non-sterile mint going to seed almost certainly would. In essence, if you're going to plant tons of non-sterile mint, you're going to have mint absolutely everywhere, and it's going to be a nightmare. So the commercial growers use this sterile variety so that they can harvest it and then be done with it. The beneficials will love all the flowers, but getting rid of mint in the garden would be terrifying. So you really do have to make sure if you're going to use the non-sterile varieties that they are planted somewhere they won't spread by the tiny seeds or the stolen, which is why you see them sort of spreading out there. Most commercial growers are generally only getting one big harvest off their mint. To my knowledge, they maybe get a second one, and there are probably exceptions, but I don't think it's possible to just let it keep cranking away unless you are heavily fertilizing it. And even then, it will probably wear out eventually. Like even perennials have their seasons. I think in terms of resources, look for those commercial growers. They can be massively helpful. You get to see little techniques that they use that maybe like smaller growers don't know about. There are also lots of good YouTube videos out there, and maybe you can pick up a trick here or there. I also think a great book on herb farming is The Organic Medicinal Herb Farmer by Jeff Carpenter. Definitely worth checking that one out. Otherwise, listeners, let us know your thoughts, resources, etc. on mint. Would love to hear them here in Kentucky, home of the mint julep. Right? It's important here. We grow our mint strictly in cloth bags and almost exclusively just to have flowers for the beneficials in the greenhouse. So I have them on the floor in the greenhouse. I just keep it as moist as I can to keep them going, and then they flower heavily over basically the last month. And it brings in a lot of pollinators and beneficials that help us around the garden. It's low risk and tasty as a flavor with watermelon and high reward. Anyway, that's it for this Thursday. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, meaning we can take donations and offer in return a tax break for you. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Big thank you to the No-Till Growers Board of Directors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support this work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of July, you get a shout out on the show, but no new signups, so no big shout outs today. All good. We will get back to our story tomorrow. Thank you for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.